Director Lee Wan sat at the head of the long table in the emergency meeting room on Earth. The room was deep underground in the Capitol building, where the most important decisions about humanity were made. Representatives from every human nation sat around the table. Their faces were angry and tired after hearing about what happened at the Council. Lee Wan had been making decisions about alien relations for 20 years. He had always believed that humans could find their place in the galactic community. He had pushed for cooperation and friendship with alien species. He had argued that humans needed to be patient and prove themselves worthy. Now he felt like a fool. The Council had made it clear that no amount of patience would ever be enough. No amount of proof would ever convince them that humans deserved equal treatment. The time for trying to please aliens was over. The holographic display in the center of the table showed the entire galaxy. Human territories were marked in blue while Council space was marked in green. The two colors were mixed together like pieces of a puzzle. Humans had colonies scattered throughout Council space. They had trade routes that connected alien worlds. They had military bases that protected Council borders. All of that was about to change. Lee Wan stood up and looked at each representative around the table. These men and women spoke for 8 billion humans, spread across dozens of worlds. They had trusted him to build relationships with aliens. Now they were trusting him to end those relationships. Effective immediately, all cooperation with Council species ends, he said. His voice was calm, but everyone in the room could hear the anger underneath. We will not trade with them. We will not defend them. We will not help them in any way. If they want to treat us as enemies, then we will act like enemies. General Park Bin was the first to speak. He commanded the human military forces that were scattered throughout the galaxy, protecting alien worlds from threats the Council did not even know existed. What about our peacekeeping missions, he asked. We have troops on 17 different worlds helping to stop wars between alien species. Bring them home. Lee Wan replied immediately. Those aliens voted to restrict us. They voted to treat us like criminals. Let them solve their own problems from now on. Dr. Han Bo raised her hand. She was in charge of all the medical aid that humans provided to alien species. Sir, we have research teams working on cures for diseases that affect millions of Council citizens. We are close to breakthroughs that could save entire planets. Not our responsibility anymore. Lee Wan said firmly. The Council made it clear that human involvement is not wanted. We will honor their wishes completely. All research partnerships end today. All medical aid stops immediately. The room was quiet, as everyone understood what this meant. Humans had been quietly helping alien species for decades. They had shared technology that made alien lives better. They had provided food to starving colonies. They had sent doctors to worlds suffering from plagues. They had built schools and hospitals and research centers. Now all of that would stop. Captain Song Yu was the next to speak. She commanded the human patrol fleets that protected the outer edges of Council space from raiders and pirates. What about border security, she asked. We have ships that guard jump points and trade routes. If we pull back, those areas will be defenseless. That is exactly the point. Lee Wan replied. Let the Council learn what the galaxy looks like without human protection. They wanted independence from us. Now they will have all the independence they can handle. The withdrawal began within hours. Human ships throughout the galaxy received the same message: return to human territory immediately. Do not engage with Council forces. Do not provide assistance. Do not respond to distress calls. The age of human cooperation with ungrateful aliens was over. Trade Captain Kim. So was halfway to the Zentari homeworld, with a cargo of medical supplies when the message reached her. The Zentari were fighting a plague that had already killed millions of their people. Human medicine was the only thing that could stop it from spreading. She looked at her cargo hold full of life-saving drugs and felt her heart break. But orders were orders. She turned her ship around and headed home. The Zentari would have to find another way to save their people on the border world of Kepler 7. Captain Yoon Ho commanded a human peacekeeping force that had been keeping two alien species from destroying each other. The Miralan and Kalani had been fighting over mining rights for 10 years. Human Soldiers stood between them and prevented the conflict from becoming a full war. When the withdrawal order came, Captain Yunho gathered his troops and prepared to leave. The alien commanders begged him to stay. They promised that the fighting would start again as soon as the humans left. They were right, but it was no longer humanity's problem, Commander Park. So ran the early warning network that watched for threats from outside Council space. Human sensors could detect raiders and pirates days before Council systems even knew they were coming. This advance warning had saved countless alien lives over the years. She shut down the network and recalled all the monitoring stations. The galaxy would go blind to external threats. But the Council had made their choice. They wanted to handle security without human interference. Now they would get their wish. Dr. Li Jin had spent 5 years on the Vorthak homeworld, studying a rare disease that only affected their species. She was close to finding a cure that would save thousands of lives every year. But the withdrawal order was clear. All humans were to return home immediately. She packed her research and prepared to leave. The Vorthak scientists she had worked with begged her to stay. They offered to hide her from Council authorities. They promised to continue the work in secret. But Li Jin knew that humanity's relationship with the Council was over. There was no point in pretending otherwise. Throughout the galaxy, the same scene played out again and again. Human teachers left alien schools. Human engineers abandoned construction projects. Human soldiers walked away from their posts. Human doctors closed their clinics. Human scientists packed up their laboratories. The Council had voted to restrict humanity. Now they would learn what restriction really meant. They would discover how much they had depended on human help. They would understand too late what they had thrown away. On Earth, Li Wan watched the reports coming in from across the galaxy. Every human ship was returning home. Every human citizen was being evacuated from Council space. Every cooperative project was being shut down. It was the largest withdrawal in galactic history. His aide brought him a message from the Zentari ambassador. The plague on their homeworld was spreading faster than expected. They were requesting emergency medical assistance from human doctors. Li Wan read the message and deleted it without responding. Another message came from the Miralan government. The peace talks on Kepler 7 had collapsed without human mediators. War was about to break out again. They were asking for human peacekeepers to return. Li Wan deleted that message too. More messages kept coming. Council, species that had voted to restrict humanity, were now begging for human help. They offered trade deals and technology exchanges. They promised to reconsider their vote if humans would just continue providing assistance. Li Wan deleted every message. The time for bargaining was over. The Council had made their position clear and humanity would respect it completely. If the aliens wanted to be independent, then they would be completely independent. Admiral Choi Da commanded the human deep space, fleets that patrolled the edges of known space hunting threats that most aliens did not even believe existed. The Void Stalkers and Keltar raiders were real, and they had been held back only by constant human vigilance. She ordered all her ships to return to human space. The Outer Rim would be undefended for the first time in 50 years, but that was no longer humanity's concern. The Council had rejected human protection, so they would learn to live without it. As the last human ship crossed into human territory, the withdrawal was complete. 47 alien species had voted to restrict humanity, and now they were getting exactly what they had asked for. They were free from human interference. They were independent from human influence. They were alone. In his office on Earth, Li Wan looked at the star charts showing human and Council territory. For the first time in decades, there was a clear line between them. No human ships crossed into Council space. No Council ships were welcome. In human territory, the galaxy had been divided. He thought about all the years he had spent trying to build bridges between humans and aliens, all the compromises he had made, all the insults he had swallowed, all the patience he had shown. It had all been wasted effort. The aliens had never wanted partnership. They had only wanted to use human strength while denying human equality. Now they would learn what the galaxy looked like without human strength protecting them. They would discover what independence really cost. They would understand too late that some things were more important than pride. The withdrawal was complete, but this was only the beginning. Soon the council would face threats they had never imagined. They would call for human help and find only silence. They would realize their mistake when it was too late to fix it. The day humanity left the council was the day the universe began to change. And the changes were just getting started. Kim Tae walked through the bright halls of the Galactic Council Station. His black shoes made soft sounds on the crystal floor that stretched for miles in every direction. The walls were covered with symbols from 47 different alien species, but there was no human symbol anywhere to be seen. He had been the human ambassador for 12 years now. 12 long years of trying to prove that humans belonged in this galaxy alongside creatures that could breathe underwater or fly through space, without ships. 12 years of being told that humans were too violent, too aggressive, too primitive to be trusted with real power. The council chamber was enormous. A giant dome made of some kind of see-through metal that let in light from 3 different suns. The seats were arranged in circles with the most important species sitting closest to the center. Humans sat in the back row along with the other newer species that nobody really cared about. Kim Tae took his seat and looked around. At the faces staring back at him, the Vorthak had blue skin and 4 arms. They thought they were the smartest species in the galaxy. The Zentari looked like giant insects, but they were actually very peaceful. The Kalani had green fur and could live for 300 years. All of them were looking at him with the same expression. They thought humans were dangerous. They thought humans were a mistake that needed to be fixed. The Vorthak ambassador stood up. His name was something long and complicated that humans could barely say. He had been the one pushing hardest to limit human expansion. He thought humans were spreading too fast and taking up too much space. The blue alien began to speak in his high-pitched voice that always made Kim Tae want to cover his ears. His words were being translated into dozens of languages at once, but Kim Tae could hear the hatred in the original tone. Humans are violent creatures, he said. They solve problems with weapons instead of words. They expand into new systems without asking permission. They build military bases instead of research stations. They are a threat to everything. The council stands for. Kim Tae wanted to stand up and shout back. He wanted to remind everyone about the 3 wars where human ships had fought and died to protect council worlds. He wanted to talk about the human colonies that shared their food with starving alien refugees. He wanted to mention the human scientists who had cured diseases that had killed millions of council citizens. But he stayed quiet. That was what humans always did in the council. They listened to the insults and tried to be better. They tried to prove they belonged. The Vorthak ambassador kept talking. His voice got louder and more. Angry as he spoke, humans take resources that belong to everyone, he said. They refuse to follow council laws when those laws get in their way. They build weapons that are too powerful for any species to have. They are preparing for war against the rest of us. That last part made Kim Tae grip his chair so hard his knuckles turned white. It was not true. Humans built strong weapons because they knew there were dangerous things in the galaxy. Things that the council refused to believe existed. Things that lived in the dark spaces between stars and wanted to destroy everything that was good. The council had never listened when humans tried to warn them about the Keltar raiders, or the Void Stalkers, or the dozen other threats that human ships fought in secret. The council liked to believe that the galaxy was safe and peaceful. They did not want to hear about monsters. Other ambassadors began to speak. They all said the same things. Humans were too aggressive. Humans were too independent. Humans could not be trusted with the same rights as other species. Some of them suggested that humans should be limited to their home system. Some wanted to put human colonies under alien supervision. Kim Tae felt his heart breaking as he listened to species after species condemn his people. The Zentari, who humans had saved from a plague, spoke against them. The Kelani, who humans had helped fight off space. Pirates voted to restrict human rights. The Miralans, who humans had taught how to build. Faster ships wanted to take away human expansion permits. Finally, it was time for the vote. Kim Tae stood up to speak for humanity one last time. He looked around the chamber at all the faces that had once seemed friendly. "We came to this council in peace," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the huge chamber. "We shared our technology. We fought alongside you. We died protecting your worlds. We asked for nothing except to be treated as equals." The chamber was silent. Everyone was looking at him, but no one seemed to care about his words. "For 50 years we have tried to prove we belong here. We have followed your laws, even when they hurt us. We have held back our military, even when we were attacked. We have been patient, while you debated whether we deserve basic rights." Kim Tae took a deep breath. He could feel the weight of his entire species on his shoulders. Everything humans had worked for was about to be decided by creatures who had never really accepted them. "If you vote to restrict us today, you will be making a terrible mistake," he said. "You think we are violent, but we are violent only to protect what we love. You think we are aggressive, but we are aggressive only against those who threaten peace. You think we are dangerous, but we are dangerous only to your enemies." The vote began. Each species ambassador stood up and announced their decision. Kim Tae watched as 47 different aliens chose to limit human rights. Only 3 species chose not to vote at all. Not a single species voted to support humanity. The Vorthak ambassador smiled as the final vote was counted. Humans would be restricted to their current territory. They could not expand into new systems. They could not build new military bases. They could not explore beyond their assigned borders. Kim Tae felt something break inside his chest. It was not just disappointment. It was the death of hope. It was the end of believing that humans could ever be accepted in this galaxy. He stood up slowly and looked around the chamber one last time. These aliens had made their choice. They had decided that humans were the enemy. Now they would have to live with what that meant. "The Council thinks they have solved a problem today," he said quietly, "but they have created a much bigger one. You have just told the galaxy that humans are not welcome here. You have made it clear that we will never be treated as equals. You have chosen to see us as enemies." Kim Tae walked toward the exit of the chamber. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Behind him, 47 species watched him go. They thought they had won. They thought they had made the galaxy safer. "We came here offering friendship," he said without turning around. "We leave here knowing where we stand. You want us to be outsiders? Then outsiders we will be. You want us to be enemies? Then you will learn what human enemies look like." The doors of the council chamber closed behind Kim Tae, with a soft sound that somehow felt like thunder. In the silence that followed, no one spoke. No one moved. No one understood that they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. Captain Park Sun was waiting for him in the docking bay. Her face showed that she had watched the whole thing. On her ship, she did not need to ask what had happened. She could see it in his eyes. "Signal all human vessels," he told her. "We are leaving and send a message to Earth. Tell them the Council has made their choice. Now they will learn what it means to live without us." As the human ships pulled away from the Council station, Kim Tae looked back at the place where he had spent 12 years of his life, trying to build bridges between species. He had failed. But maybe failure was exactly what the galaxy needed to learn the truth. In the council chamber, the Vorthak ambassador was celebrating. He thought he had saved the galaxy from human aggression. He had no idea that he had just removed the only thing standing between the council and the monsters that hunted in the dark. The day humanity left the council was the day the universe began to tremble, and it would keep trembling until every alien species understood what they had lost. 3 months had passed since the humans left, and President Namho of the Zentari Colony Federation was staring at reports that made his blood run cold. The Outer Rim colonies were going dark one by one. Each day brought news of another world that had stopped sending messages, another system that had gone completely silent. The Keltar raiders had come out of the deep space like a plague of locusts. They moved in massive fleets of black ships that looked like they were made from the bones of dead worlds. Their weapons could crack planets, and their warriors were bred only for destruction. They had been humanity's enemies for 200 years, but the Council had never believed they were real. Now they were burning everything in their path. Namho had been president of the Zentari colonies for 15 years. He had seen wars and disasters and famines, but nothing like this. The raiders were not just conquering worlds. They were harvesting them. They took everything of value and left, behind empty husks of rock floating in space. His communication officer ran into the command center with terror in her eyes. "Sir," she gasped, "we just lost contact with the Kepler mining colonies. All 7 worlds have gone silent. The last message we received was a distress call about black ships appearing in their system." Ho felt his heart sink. The Kepler colonies had 3 million Zentari living and working there. They were miners and engineers and farmers who had never hurt anyone. They had families and children and dreams. Now they were gone. "How many does that make?" he asked quietly. 43 worlds. "Sir," the officer replied, 43 worlds in 3 months. Almost 20 million people. Nam. Ho closed his eyes and tried to think. The Council's combined military forces were supposed to protect the outer colonies, but they were failing badly. The alien commanders had no idea how to fight the Keltar. They did not understand their tactics or their technology or their mindset. The Council had always depended on human intelligence about external threats. Human deep space scouts had mapped Keltar movements for decades. Human military analysts had studied their attack patterns. Human strategists had developed the defensive, measures that kept them contained in the outer darkness. Now all of that knowledge was locked away behind the borders of human space. General Kang Min commanded what was left of the Council Defense Forces. He had been a ground commander for most of his career, fighting small wars between Council species. He had never faced an enemy like the Keltar, and it showed in every failed battle. The raiders moved in ways that made no sense to Council military doctrine. They appeared to attack randomly, but there was a pattern that Council computers could not detect. They seemed to know exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage with minimum effort. What General Kang did not know was that the Keltar always followed the same basic strategy. They would probe defenses looking for weak points, then strike in coordinated waves that overwhelmed local forces. Human commanders had learned to recognize the signs of an incoming raid, but Council forces had no such experience. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was chaos. Ambassador after ambassador stood up to demand action, but no one had any solutions. The Vorthak delegate who had led the campaign against humanity was notably quiet now that his people were dying alongside everyone else. "We need to send a message to the human territories," someone suggested desperately. "Ask them for help against the raiders." The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what the human response would be. The same message they had been sending for 3 months. Humanity respects the Council's desire for independence and will not interfere in galactic affairs. Chancellor Park Do of the Zentari spoke up with anger in his voice. "The humans knew this would happen," he said. "They knew the raiders were out. They are waiting. They tried to warn us, but we would not listen. That is not true." The Vorthak ambassador protested. "The humans never provided proof of these threats. They only claimed to be protecting us so they could expand their military." "Then where are the raiders coming from, Park?" Do demanded. "How do they know exactly where to strike? How do they have weapons that our scientists have never seen?" The truth was that human deep space fleets had been fighting the Keltar for generations in the empty spaces between stars. Every human colony ship had been escorted by warships. Every human trade route had been patrolled by fighters. The Council had never seen the battles because humans had always fought them far from civilization. Now the battles were coming to civilization itself. Captain Yoon Ki of the Council Defense Corps studied the tactical displays showing Keltar fleet movements. The patterns were completely alien to everything he had learned in military academy. The raiders seemed to appear from nowhere, strike with overwhelming force and disappear before reinforcements could arrive. His tactical computer tried to predict their next move, but every analysis came back with error messages. The Keltar were not following any known military doctrine. They were not using standard fleet formations. They were not attacking strategic targets in any recognizable pattern. What Captain Yoon Ki did not understand was that the Keltar were not trying to conquer territory. They were hunting. They moved like predators stalking prey, and they had been doing it for thousands of years. Human military advisors could have explained their behavior, but those advisors were gone. The attacks were getting closer to the core worlds. Now the raiders had swept through the outer colonies and were moving toward the more populated systems. Each victory made them stronger as they captured ships and weapons and prisoners to use in their next assault. Dr. Song Yu was the Council's chief military analyst, and she had been studying every scrap of data about the Keltar attacks. She had found references to similar raids in old human military reports, but those reports had been classified and were no longer available to Council researchers. Humans had detailed files on Keltar ship designs, weapon capabilities, and battle tactics. They had psychological profiles of Keltar commanders and strategic analyses of their long-term goals. All of that information had been offered to the Council years ago, but the offer had been refused. Now it was too late to ask for it. The Miralyn homeworld was the next target. The raiders appeared in their system without warning and began their attack. The Miralyn defense fleet was one of the largest in Council space, but it crumbled under the Keltar assault like paper in a fire. Admiral Lee Sun watched the battle from the Council command center, feeling helpless as another member world fell to the raiders. The Miralyn had voted to restrict humanity just 3 months ago. Now their cities were burning and their people were being taken as slaves. We cannot stop them, he admitted to the other Council leaders. We do not have the weapons or the knowledge or the experience to fight this enemy. Then, what do you suggest? The Zentari representative asked. Admiral Lee Sun looked around the room at the faces of the surviving Council members. They were all thinking the same thing, but none of them wanted to say it out loud. We need to ask the humans for help, he said finally. We need to admit that we made a mistake. The Vorthak ambassador stood up angrily. The humans probably planned this, he said. They probably made some kind of deal with the raiders to attack us after they left. That is impossible. Another delegate replied. The Keltar are trying to destroy all intelligent life. They would never make deals with anyone. Then explain how the raiders knew exactly when to attack, the Vorthak demanded. Explain how they knew our defenses would be weak. Answer was simple, but no one in the chamber wanted to admit it. The Keltar had been watching and waiting for their chance to strike. They had been held back by human patrols and human intelligence and human willingness to fight in the dark places, where no one else would go. Now the humans were gone and the raiders were free to do what they had always wanted to do. They were free to harvest the soft, civilized worlds that had lived in safety behind walls. They had never seen, as the Council session ended in chaos and finger-pointing. The Keltar fleets moved toward their next targets. They had tasted victory and they wanted more. The galaxy that had rejected human protection was about to learn what protection had really cost. The first consequences were just the beginning. Much worse was coming, and the Council was completely unprepared. The humans had tried to warn them, but warnings were useless to people who refused to listen. Now the galaxy would burn, and the survivors would finally understand what humanity had been protecting them from all along. 6 months after humanity left the Council, the galaxy was dying. Admiral Choi Min stood on the bridge of the last functioning Council warship and watched another star system go dark on the tactical display. The Keltar raiders had broken through every defense line and were systematically destroying everything in their path. But the raiders were not the only threat emerging from the darkness. Long-range sensors had detected something even worse, moving toward Council space. The readings made no sense according to known physics, but the signatures were unmistakable. Void Stalkers were coming, and they were coming in numbers that no one had ever seen before. Admiral Choi Min had commanded Council fleets for 20 years, but he had never heard of Void Stalkers outside of human reports that the Council had dismissed as propaganda. Now he was staring at sensor readings that proved the humans had been telling the truth about horrors that lived in the deep void. The creatures were massive, beyond comprehension. Each Void Stalker ship was the size of a small moon, and they seemed to be made from materials that should not exist. They moved through space without any visible means of propulsion, and they left trails of distorted reality. Behind them, Dr. Kang. So was the Council's chief science officer, and she was analyzing the first Void Stalker remains that had ever been recovered. The samples had been taken from a derelict ship found drifting in the outer rim, and what she found made her question everything she knew about biology and physics. The creatures were not exactly alive and not exactly machines. They were something in between, something that violated the basic laws of nature. The organic parts of their bodies were fused with synthetic components in ways that should have been impossible. Their nervous systems used quantum effects that council science could barely understand. How did the humans fight these things? She whispered to her research team as she studied tissue samples that seemed to shift and change even after death. The answer was in classified human databases that the council had never been given access to. Humans did not just fight the Void Stalkers, they had been fighting them for centuries. They had developed weapons specifically designed to kill creatures that existed partially outside normal reality. Every human deep space explorer was trained to recognize the signs of Void Stalker activity. Every human colony ship carried weapons that could disrupt quantum biology. Every human soldier learned how to fight enemies that could phase in and out of existence. What the Council had seen as human paranoia and aggression was actually the result of constant warfare against cosmic horrors that most species could not even imagine. The humans had not been preparing to conquer the galaxy. They had been preparing to defend it from things that wanted to consume everything. Captain Park so commanded the defense of the Zentari core worlds, but her forces were falling apart. The Council military had been designed to keep peace between civilized species, not to fight extinction-level threats from outside reality. The Void Stalkers did not conquer planets, they consumed them. Each world they touched was converted into more of their kind. The matter was broken down and rebuilt into new creatures and new ships. The populations were not killed. They were absorbed and transformed into parts of the collective. We cannot evacuate fast enough, Captain Park so reported to the Council emergency session. The civilian transports are too slow and we do not have enough of them. Entire worlds are being consumed faster than we can move people. The mathematics were terrifying. Each Void Stalker could process an entire planet in days, turning billions of living beings into extensions of their collective consciousness. The survivors fled in terror, but there was nowhere to run. The creatures were spreading in all directions at once. General Songki was trying to coordinate the defense of the inner systems, but his commanders were abandoning their posts faster than he could replace them. The psychological pressure of fighting Void Stalkers was breaking the minds of experienced officers. The creatures did not just attack with weapons, they attacked with fear itself. Their presence caused hallucinations and madness in most species. Only humans seemed to have the mental resilience to face them without losing their sanity. The secret was, in human childhood training, every human child was taught from birth to confront the impossible, to stand firm against things that should not exist. What other species saw as human stubbornness was actually preparation for fighting enemies that could drive rational minds to madness. Commander Lebo was monitoring communications from across the galaxy, and the reports were getting worse every day. The Kel-Tar Raiders had joined forces with something called the Devourers, and they were working together to harvest entire star systems. The Devourers were another threat that humans had warned about for decades. They were ancient machines left behind by a dead civilization, and they had been programmed to consume all organic life. The Council had dismissed them as another human fantasy. Now the fantasy was burning its way through Council space, consuming everything in its path. The machines were methodical and efficient. They would strip a world of all biological matter and move on to the next target, leaving behind perfectly preserved cities with no one left alive to inhabit them. Dr. Kim Na studied the Devourer technology from wreckage recovered after a failed attack. The machines were incredibly advanced, but they had one weakness. They could be defeated by weapons that disrupted their quantum processors. Weapons that only humans knew how to build. The irony was devastating. The Council had spent decades trying to limit human weapons development because they thought human technology was too dangerous. Now they were facing enemies that could only be stopped by the very weapons they had tried to ban. Captain Yoon Ho led the evacuation of the Miralan homeworld as the Void Stalkers closed in. His ships were overloaded with refugees, and he knew that most of them would not survive the journey to safety. There simply was not enough space or time to save everyone. The children were crying, and the adults were praying to gods that seemed to have abandoned them. The great civilization that had flourished for thousands of years was ending in terror and chaos, all because they had rejected the protection of the only species willing to fight the darkness. Emergency broadcasts were going out across the galaxy from the few worlds that still had functioning communication systems. Every message was the same desperate plea for help that would never come. Mayday, Mayday. This is the Kalani system. We are under attack by unknown entities. Our defenses have failed. We need immediate assistance. Any ship that receives this message, please respond. But there was no response. The human ships that might have answered such calls were far away behind borders that the Council had demanded they respect. The age of human rescue missions was over. Admiral Choi Min received a final transmission from the Outer Rim before that entire region of space went silent. The message was from a human exploration ship that had been trapped behind enemy lines when the withdrawal began. To anyone who receives this message, this is Captain Park Jun of the human exploration vessel Discovery. We have been observing the enemy advance from long range, and we can confirm that the situation is worse than the Council believes. The transmission was breaking up with static, but the words that came through were terrifying. The Keltar are not working alone. They have awakened something ancient, something that has been sleeping in the galactic core for millions of years. The humans call it the hunger, and it is coming for everything that lives. The message ended with the sound of weapons fire and then silence. Captain Park Jun and his crew had died alone in the darkness, trying to warn a galaxy that had rejected them. As the enemy fleets converged on the remaining Council worlds, the truth became clear. The galaxy was not just under attack, it was being systematically harvested by forces that had been waiting for this moment for eons. The humans had known this day would come. They had prepared for it, and they had tried to prepare everyone else. But the Council had chosen to see human warnings as threats and human weapons as aggression. Now the price of that choice was being paid in the blood of billions. The galaxy was burning, and the creatures that fed on civilizations were growing stronger with every world they consumed. In the depths of space, something vast and ancient was stirring. The hunger was waking up, and it had sensed the weakness that came from a divided galaxy. It was coming to feast on the remains of species that had chosen pride over survival. The Council had wanted independence from human protection, and now they had it. They were independent and alone, and dying, while the monsters they had refused to believe grew fat on their fear. The galaxy burned, and in the flames the truth was finally clear. Humanity had not been the threat, they had been the shield, and now the shield was gone. 1 year after humanity left the Council, the galactic map looked completely different. Half of the known worlds were gone, consumed by creatures that should not have existed. The other half were defended by fortress stations that flew the flag of the Terran Republic. Chancellor Park Du stood on the observation deck of New Terra Station, watching construction crews finish the latest ring of defensive platforms. The massive structure orbited a dead world that had once been home to billions of Zentari. Now it served as humanity's forward command post in what used to be Council space. The refugees came in waves every day, ships packed with survivors from species that had voted to restrict humanity just 12 months earlier. Now they begged for protection from the very people they had rejected. Grant them asylum. Park Du told his aide as another transport full of Miralan civilians requested permission to dock. But they come as guests, not as equals. The age of taking human sacrifice for granted is over. The irony was not lost on anyone. Humans had spent 50 years trying to prove they belonged in galactic civilization. Now they were the only civilization left, and everyone else was begging to join them. Captain Kim Na monitored the communications array from the command center of humanity's newest battleship. The desperate messages never stopped coming. Former Council species pleaded for military assistance, for evacuation, help, for any kind of support. Most messages received the same automated response: the Terran Republic appreciates your request for assistance, however we must respect the Galactic Council's decision to handle security independently. Please contact your local council representative for aid. The few messages that did receive personal responses came with conditions that would have been unthinkable. A year ago, humans would provide protection in exchange for complete surrender of sovereignty. The refugee species would become protectorates under human authority with no voice in their own governance. Some species accepted immediately. The Kalani government signed the papers while their homeworld burned behind them. The Zentari colonies agreed to human rule, rather than face extinction at the hands of the Voidstalkers. Others tried to negotiate, tried to maintain some independence, but the humans were not interested in compromise anymore. The galaxy had made its choice, and now humanity was making theirs. Lieutenant Li Su served aboard one of the human dreadnoughts that patrolled the borders between human space and the chaos beyond. She had been a child when the Council rejected humanity, and she had grown up watching the galaxy tear itself apart. The captain of her ship was the son of a human peacekeeper who had died protecting Vorthak colonies from raiders. The irony was beautiful and terrible. The same Vorthak who had led the campaign against humanity were now extinct, their worlds consumed by the very threats they had refused to believe existed. Sir, incoming transmission from the Vorthak survivor fleet. Li Su reported, "They are requesting permission to enter human territory." Captain Song Min looked at the tactical display showing the handful of ships that represented all that remained of a once proud species. The Vorthak had been the loudest voices calling for human restrictions. Now they were refugees with nowhere else to go. "Send them the standard terms," he replied. "They can have asylum if they accept protectorate status, and if they agree to work camps for the next 20 years, they owe a debt for every human who died protecting them." The terms were harsh, but fair. The Vorthak had spent decades benefiting from human protection while voting to restrict human rights. Now they would work to rebuild what their arrogance had destroyed. Dr. Hanbo ran the xenobiology labs on New Terra Station, where human scientists studied the remains of the creatures that had consumed the galaxy. The Voidstalkers and Devourers and Keltar Raiders had all been real threats that humans had fought for centuries. Every species that came begging for human protection brought new intelligence about the enemy. The galaxy was full of horrors that the Council had refused to acknowledge. Cosmic predators that fed on civilizations, ancient machines that converted organic life into raw materials, creatures from outside reality that existed only to cause suffering. Humans had known about all of them, because humans were the only species willing to go into the dark places where monsters lived. The Council species had lived in comfort and safety, while human explorers mapped the threats beyond the rim. Now those threats had come calling, and only humanity was prepared to face them. Commander Park Jun had survived the battle that destroyed his exploration ship, and he now served as an intelligence analyst for the human military. His reports painted a picture of a galaxy under siege by forces that most species could not even comprehend. The enemy was not random, they were coordinated. The Keltar Raiders were working with the Voidstalkers, who were being directed by something even worse. The ancient entity known as the Hunger had awakened, and it was orchestrating the consumption of the galaxy. But the Hunger had made one mistake. It had assumed that humanity would fall like all the other species. It had not counted on human stubbornness, human adaptability, and human refusal to surrender, no matter how hopeless things seemed. General Choi So commanded the human fleets that were slowly pushing back against the darkness. Her ships used weapons that the Council had tried to ban, technologies that other species considered too dangerous to develop. The irony was perfect. The same weapons that aliens feared were the only thing standing between them and total extinction. Human aggression was the shield that protected what remained of galactic civilization. "We are not the same species that begged for acceptance," a year ago she told her officers during a strategy briefing. "We are not trying to prove ourselves anymore. We are not asking for permission to exist. We are taking our place as the dominant force in this galaxy, whether anyone likes it or not." The human military had evolved. During the year of isolation, free from Council restrictions, they had developed technologies that made their previous weapons look primitive. Quantum disruptors that could kill Voidstalkers, reality anchors that prevented phase-shifting psionic dampeners that blocked mental attacks. Every refugee species that joined the human protectorate brought new knowledge about enemy capabilities, but they also brought something else. They brought fear. Fear of the humans who had saved them. Fear of the species they had rejected. Admiral Park Da commanded the defense of the inner human worlds, and she watched the sensor readings that showed refugee fleets approaching human space. Every day brought new survivors and new stories of worlds consumed by cosmic horrors. The aliens were learning that there were worse fates than human domination. They were discovering that independence was only valuable if you were strong enough to defend it. They were understanding too late that some protectors were worth keeping. Captain Li Min led the human rescue fleets that ventured into enemy territory to evacuate civilian populations. His ships were fast and deadly, and they struck at the creatures that fed on fear. His crews were volunteers who had grown up hearing stories about the monsters in the dark. The mission reports were always the same. Arrive at a dying world fight through hordes of cosmic predators. Evacuate who could be saved and retreat before reinforcements arrived. It was dangerous work, but it was necessary work, and only humans were willing to do it. The galaxy was learning new lessons about survival. The soft, comfortable civilization that the Council had built was gone, replaced by a harder reality where only the strong survived. Humans had tried to teach these lessons through diplomacy and cooperation. Now they were teaching them through demonstration. In the ruins of the old council chamber on the abandoned station that had once been the center of galactic government, automated systems still broadcast the last official message. The council regrets that circumstances have prevented proper diplomatic resolution of current galactic threats. But there were no council members left to hear the message. They were all dead or fled, or begging for human protection. The age of committees and debate and compromise was over. The age of human dominance had begun. The universe had learned to fear many things in the past year. It had learned to fear the void stalkers that consumed worlds. It had learned to fear the ancient machines that harvested life. It had learned to fear the cosmic predators that fed on civilizations. But most of all, it had learned to fear the consequences of rejecting the only species willing to fight. For everyone else, the galaxy had wanted humanity to be less aggressive, less independent, less dangerous. Now it understood that humanity's aggression was the price of protection, that humanity's independence was the source of their strength, and that humanity's danger was directed at the things that threatened everyone else. The day humanity left the Council was the day the universe began to tremble, not with the fear of human conquest, but with the fear of what happened when humans were not there to stand guard. The galaxy had learned the hard way that some monsters were worth having on your side. In the end, the lesson was simple. The universe was full of predators, and only predators could fight them. Humanity had offered to be teachers, and protectors and partners, but when that offer was rejected, they became something far more effective. They became the apex predators of a galaxy that had forgotten how dangerous the darkness could be. And in that darkness, they were exactly what the universe needed, even if it was not what the universe had wanted.